Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. Together we dive into the world of sci-fi and science fiction. From episodes of Star Trek, Star Wars, to The Walking Dead, Resident Evil, all the hot new science fiction movies from the back doors of Marvel or DC. The Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast. You'll never look at science fiction the same way again.
You have once again tuned in to the GSMC podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Josh Hadley, and tonight, the first segment I want to look at, this might anger some people, or some people might go, preach on, brother, I know exactly what you're talking about. I want to talk about fandoms. Not the science fiction fandom itself, although this is an element of that. What is wrong with certain fandoms? And I'm not going to single out like, the My Little Ponies or anything like that. I'm referring to fandom where you sort of lose yourself. And I don't mean that in a good way. Because for example, pre-pandemic, pre-COVID, I saw Bruce Campbell's live show, An Evening with Bruce Campbell in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. And I want to say it was a good show. He was showing Evil Dead 2. He would come out, do a talk, interact with the audience. It should have been interesting. Now, I was covering this for a newspaper, and I've covered lots of these things. They've sent me to Ministry concerts, Judas Priest concerts. I got to see numerous stand-up comics, Paul Reiser, Joe Bob Briggs, things like that. They would send me to these things all the time. And personally, I would request them. When I saw something cool, I would kind of use this as an excuse to kind of nudge my way in and go, hey, can you buy me tickets to this? So it was kind of neat in that regard. But what was interesting about this, and not in a good way, was not that Bruce Campbell was bad. He was fantastic, and I got to interview him a couple of days before the show for the paper. He was super nice on the phone. I am not complaining about Bruce Campbell one bit. It was Bruce Campbell's fans. Now, for years, you've seen Bruce Campbell interact with his fans in this very sort of aggressive, borderline mean-spirited way. And now I understand why he does that. Now I understand why he comes across like such a jerk to his own fans sometimes. Because in a lot of cases, they really deserve it. And like I said, I don't know exactly what kind of fandom I want to put this down to. There's almost this, I don't want to say introvert, I don't want to say like an Asperger's or an autism sort of thing, but a narrow view of, I want to do this, and I don't care who else I hurt. For instance, when I was going to see Bruce Campbell with my girlfriend in Milwaukee, prior to the show, we went out to eat at a restaurant that was a few blocks away, and there was definitely some people that were going to the show there, because I saw a guy with like a Lucio Fulci t-shirt, and another guy had an Evil Dead t-shirt, and it's like, okay, those people are definitely going to this show, and I had no problem with them. It was once you got there. So this is a huge, as I said, this is pre-COVID, so this was a huge, packed amphitheater, big screen. We were going to watch Evil Dead 2, and everyone seemed to be acting like they were watching this movie in their own living room. Nobody was acting like, hey, there are other people here that we should be considering and being considerate of. That is one of my huge problems here, was everyone acted like I'm the only one here. You had numerous people. Now, this is not a Rocky Horror kind of thing. Okay, I know in the Rocky Horror Picture Show, it's an interactive experience. You talk to the screen, you throw toast, you throw rice, etc. I get that. If I'm going to a Rocky Horror Show, I expect that to happen. I would like to actually see Rocky Horror on the screen just to see the movie without all of the idiots singing along, because I didn't buy my ticket to see idiots singing along. And that's exactly what happened here. Not singing. They were reciting all of the dialogue. Woodshed, or groovy, and all this, and they're just screaming it at the screen when Ash, after he makes the sawed-off shotgun and he twirls it around to go into the back compartment, people started standing up and doing that hand motion and getting in your way, and the people are just yelling out like they're watching Mystery Science Theater. They're riffing on the movie right there in the theater. And it's like, shut the hell up! I want to watch the movie, you arrogant jerks. And the fandom, because I complained about this on my Facebook page the night or two after. I was the one shouted down. I was like, these people are annoying. And the number one response I got was, they were just having a good time. Why can't you just let them have a good time? And it's like, okay, you're part of the problem. You're part of this fandom that feels entitled to its fandom. And you saw that again and again. Like when Bruce was asking questions of the audience, it was all about them. It was all about the individual and going, oh my god, I'm interacting with Bruce Campbell. And not realizing you're wasting everyone else's time with this. When I saw Joe Bob Briggs, the exact opposite happened. Everybody was super respectful. Everybody was quiet when Briggs, no, this was not a movie, but when he was going through his speech, everyone was just so down to earth. Also in Milwaukee, with Joe Bob Briggs. But there was something about Bruce Campbell fans, something about Bruce Campbell that brought out the kind of asshole in all of these people. And you got a lot of these very nerd complaints that you always hear, like, I don't know why it's so hard for nerds to use deodorant. I'm 45 years old. I've been a nerd since before I could even read. I bathe daily. I use deodorant. I'm very cognizant of how I smell and come across to others. Why can't other nerds be like that? Because after a while, you could kind of start to smell it in this amphitheater that, wow, a lot of these people didn't use deodorant today, did they? And that was very disturbing. And then you also had all this fanboyism. A guy a couple of seats from me, I brought this up in an earlier episode, a couple of seats from me and another guy who, to the best of my knowledge, and I don't mean a couple in a that kind of way, but I mean like people who did not come together, they didn't know each other outside of this from what I could tell. They were comparing who was the bigger Bruce Campbell nerd. Oh yeah? Well, I have an original poster from Evil Dead 3 from Army of Darkness from Thailand. Oh yeah? Well, I've got the original script with the original ending of Evil Dead. Oh yeah? Well, I've got the Japanese comic. And they were comparing it like they were comparing the size of what's in their pants. Like, who's the bigger Bruce Campbell fan? And part of me, a part that I wish I did repress it, but made me feel bad, was I almost leaned over and said, you guys know I've got his phone number and I just talked to him the other day, right? I didn't do that, but part of me really wanted to. And you had that sort of measuring contest going on, and then, because this was in an old theater, so it had multiple floors with an old elevator and everything, and the bathrooms were near the green room, for lack of a better term. I don't think it was an actual green room, but for lack of a better term, that's what we'll call it. And so at one point, I had to go to the bathroom. So I had to go down like three flights. I took the elevator, went down there, went to the bathroom, and I started kind of noticing something. There's a lot of people just hanging out here. And I'm like, well, there's not like a line to the bathroom. The bathroom's empty. They're not waiting to go to the bathroom. And then it dawned on me, oh, that's the green room. These guys are so pathetic. They're going to try and ambush Bruce Campbell outside of the green room as he's maybe walking to the screen or something to be like, oh my God, I breathe the same air as Bruce Campbell. I breathe the same air as him. Because it's like, first of all, he wasn't signing anything. That was right on the ticket. You're not getting anything signed. So what do you gain by stalking him outside of the bathroom other than giving fanboyism a kind of raging boner? Because you hear these stories. Like I said, I hadn't experienced this before. At least not on this level. I had to a slight degree. But why do you have to be such a ridiculous fanboy that you make everyone look bad? Like, Ernie Hudson has told this story before. He was at a convention and he had to go to the bathroom, so he was using the urinal. Some guy, some guy he's never met before, is using the urinal next to him and just leans over and goes, "Don't cross the streams." And Ernie Hudson's reaction was, I need to get away from this guy right now. Why is that the image you want to bring to your fandom? Because fandoms are a problem. Fandoms should be inclusive. You know, it does go back to that old William Shatner Saturday Night Live segment. The whole, move out of your parents' basement, talk to a girl, get a life. And Shatner, my ego right here, when I interviewed William Shatner, he was shocked, not only that I remembered that segment when I brought it up to him, but he was shocked at how big that Saturday Night Live segment has become on the internet. Because I don't think nerds and fans understand there was way more truth in that Saturday Night Live segment than they want to admit. And I think that's a huge, huge problem. Because fandoms have become an issue. You especially see this with the Marvel movies and the DC movies. You see this so heavy, it's almost tribalistic. You're either a DC guy or you're a Marvel guy. This completely came to the head when the DC fans, who refuse to admit how bad those movies are, and I hate the Marvel movies too, but they had this whole, Disney's paying off the critics. That's why Batman vs. Superman and Suicide Squad did really bad. Oh, it can't be because they're absolutely garbage movies that have no internal consistency and are arduous tasks to get through. No. It's Disney and those Marvel fans. They're the cause of this. It's like, do you understand what you sound like? You're worse than Alex Jones like that. And that's what you see. It's this tribalism. You're with my tribe or you're with the other tribe. It's like that George Bush. You're either with us or you're against us. Either you're a DC fanboy or you're a Marvel fanboy. You can't be both. Well, guess what? I'm neither. But that's the problem. We have these fandoms that are becoming, oh God, do I hate this word, toxic. They're becoming toxic fandoms. You sort of saw that with Star Wars. Now, The Last Jedi is an absolute piece of utter garbage. It's one of the worst science fiction films I've seen in decades. But the way people reacted to it was for all the wrong reasons. The movie's absolute garbage because Rian Johnson is an absolute garbage writer and director. And okay, I didn't like some of the stuff that was in it for the SJW stuff and all that. But on the other side, my God, did people just leap on this like it was a cause celeb to hate this movie, or the exact opposite. You're nothing but a crying, misogynistic fanboy if you didn't think it was the greatest science fiction movie ever made. It's tribalism. That's what we have to get around as science fiction fans or fans of any kind of media. You have to look at everything critically. Because you always see this, like when Captain Marvel came out, again, garbage film. All of the critical reviews were not only positive, they were so positive that your radar started going up and you said to yourself, there's no way that this is real. Some of them were calling this not only the best Marvel movie, but the best movie made in the last 15 years. And you just want to slap the crap out of some of these people. Fandom is a problem. You have to moderate your fandom. Don't be like the Bruce Campbell fans that I had to deal with. Those people made me hate going to live events like this. Don't be like those people. Embrace your fandom for what it is. Don't let your fandom completely drag down everything else and everyone else around you. You can love Steven Universe, but to attack people who don't love it is insanity. To think Rick and Morty, one of the dumbest programs ever made, is so super genius that you're somehow smarter than everyone else because you got all the jokes. Well, first of all, there aren't any jokes because the show's not funny, but the point is, set aside your fandom and your awful, egomaniacal, myopic, narrow look at the world. So on that note, when we come back, let's talk about video games and how they rot your brain.
Want to find out what movies to go see? Then check out the GSMC Movie Podcast. It's your ticket to the latest movies, whether it's a new blockbuster event, romantic, comedy, or action flick. This show has got it all covered. They talk some what to go see now. Don't bother. What's hot on Netflix and everything in between. That's gsmcpodcast.com/movie-podcast. When it's all about the movies, it has to be this new show. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit gsmcpodcast.com for more info.
So there's been a recent controversy here around video games and what they do to people. And part of this, it's really hard to describe this. Joe Rogan brought it up, and Joe Rogan's an idiot for multiple reasons. I'm so sick of when I see Joe Rogan trending. The only thing I ever want to see when I see Joe Rogan trending is that he got his jaw broken and he can't speak anymore. But Joe Rogan's an idiot, so leaving that aside, he was talking about how video games basically rot your brain. Video games are these terrible things. Video games, you become addicted to it. It's this endorphin rush, and you can't get over it. Oh my God, the video games, I need to play the video game. I need to poop sock. I've never played World of Warcraft. I've never been a Warcrafter, but I used to work with a couple of them when I worked at an NBC station. And my God, I didn't know what poop socking was until he would tell me about some of his 16, 18-hour World of Warcraft benders, and he didn't even seem embarrassed that he'd poop socked. For those of you that don't know, poop socking is where you just cannot leave the game, not even to go to the bathroom. So if you've got to poop, you poop in a sock, set it aside, so you can keep playing the game. I wish I were making that up, but I am not. Poop socking is an actual thing. So Joe Rogan was talking about how he is so addicted to video games, he can't even be around video games anymore. If he sees it, he knows his whole night's gone. He's going to play for 16 hours straight, and that he's addicted to it. And you've seen this more and more. You've seen actual studies that talk about the addictive nature of video games because of the endorphin rush you get, that you actually become addicted to playing a game. Not that you need to see what happens next in the story, not that you need to get the 5,000 kills to get your stupid little imaginary digital badge or anything like that. But no, you need to keep playing the game, you need to keep shooting people in the face, oh my god, that it's like a drug. And I can kind of see where people are coming from. I kind of can. Not in the way that I agree with them, but I see how they're getting to this place that they're getting to. Part of that is by being by cherry picking the examples that they want. It doesn't matter whether you're a drinker, you take drugs, you love My Little Pony, or you love spaghetti. Say you just love spaghetti so much you eat spaghetti every single day, 7 days a week for one of your meals. Yeah, that's going to become a problem at that point. And they're always going to find an extreme example of not just a fandom, but any kind of activity. There's going to be an extreme example of this stuff. That said, they always use that extreme example to wrap everything else inside it. Like, go back to Frederick Wortham and Seduction of the Innocent with comic books. Now, his synopsis basically was, because he dealt with juvenile delinquents as a criminal psychologist, or as a clinical psychologist, I mean. So his thing was, every juvenile delinquent and every violent individual that I deal with all read comic books, and they all read the EC comic books. So therefore, the EC comic books are the reason that they are violent juvenile delinquents. When in fact, he overlooked the fact that millions upon millions upon millions of kids read those comics, and only a small percentage were juvenile delinquents. So when you look at it like that, he just cherry-picked his examples, and he did that a lot. But that's what I'm talking about here. Whenever you see one of these video games are destructive, or one of these stories where a kid played World of Warcraft, you don't hear about this as much anymore, but like a kid played World of Warcraft so long he became dehydrated and died because he just couldn't let his clan down, or they had a giant raid scheduled or something, or, he was gonna Leroy Jenkins it, or something like that. You hear these stories, and what they never tell you is, this is the farthest extreme we have on whatever this is. They never tell you that. They use this one example to try and wrap you up in video games are bad for you. Video games need to be regulated. Video games rot your brain. Video games turn you into a juvenile delinquent. Nah. Video games are not the problem. The person is the problem. Okay? If Joe Rogan has a problem with being addicted to video games, that's not video games' fault that he can't put a controller down once he starts. I mean, I've had nights where maybe I started playing a game, I don't know, at midnight, maybe after my wife went to bed or something like that. And all of a sudden I look up and it's 5 a.m. and the sun's coming up, and I realize, oh crap, I gotta go to work tomorrow. I should go to bed. No part of me has ever said, screw work. I gotta see what happens 3 levels from now. No part of me has ever said that. I mean, sure, I kind of lost myself in the, hey, 5 hours just vanished, but I was enjoying myself and no harm was done. When you have that addictive personality, you go, screw it. I'm gonna keep playing. I'm going to call in from sick from work tomorrow. I mean, you actually see this thing, and again, these are extreme examples, and these are the examples they use to say video games are bad for you. Or like when a new Call of Duty or Medal of Honor comes out, you have all of these mass sick call-ins at restaurants and things like that, because all the guys are going home to play Call of Duty that day. They can't be bothered to go to work. It's COD day. It's Medal of Honor day. And that to me says you're an idiot. You don't know how to live in the real world. As much as I'm looking forward to Cyberpunk 2077, I'm not going to lose my job so I can play Cyberpunk 2077. I work a day job amongst all this. I write for magazines, I write for novels, I write for comic books. I also work a day job because I have responsibilities. I live in the real world. Now, someone like Joe Rogan, he has enough money, he can just screw off and play Call of Duty or whatever all day long if he wants to. But again, he's an extreme example. Most of you listening to this, you can't. So here's the thing. Video games do not rot your brain. Video games are not dangerous. Video games are not addictive. There are certain people to whom the act of playing a video game can be addictive. But that's not the video game's fault. That's not the video game industry. As much as we like to lay all the problems on EA, and trust me, they're a garbage company with garbage moral, well, they don't even have morals, but you understand what I mean. It's not the industry's fault. You can't handle it. I mean, think about it like this. Let's think about video games on the same level as alcohol. So, alcohol, in and of itself, is not addictive. You see tons of people, more than you see of an alcoholic, who can have a drink with dinner. And that's it. They can just have a glass of wine, maybe once a week, go out with the boys, one night a week. And that's all the alcohol consumption that they have. Then you see these people that just need it. They need it. They need another drink. They need to get hammered. They need to get plastered. It's not the alcohol's fault you become addicted to it. Because look at all of the people who aren't addicted to it. Go back to my Frederick Wortham example. For every one kid who was a juvenile delinquent that read Tales from the Crypt or Vault of Horror, look at the 3 million kids who also read those comics and were not juvenile delinquents. So you have to pace yourself when you see things like this. Because this actually angered me when I saw this Joe Rogan nonsense. I'm like, oh boy, here we go again. And the problem is maybe how the media looks at it. Because again, they cherry pick their examples, but I remember when this all happened when the Nintendo came out in the late 80s. I remember all this nonsense of people were so addicted to playing Super Mario Brothers or Legend of Zelda. Kids would skip school because they needed to get a high score, things like that. I remember it back in the arcade days in the late 70s and the early 80s. Kids would skip school. They would go and go to the arcade and spend all their money. They would go and, it was almost, some kids were treating it like a drug. They would, steal their mom's silverware so they get quarters to go play Pac-Man and Space Invaders. And I'm not saying that thing doesn't happen. I'm saying that's not the majority. And when you take the minority as the majority, you have a huge problem. And that's what I want to get through here. I bet every single one of you listening to this is able to put down a video game controller when it comes bedtime, or when your stomach starts rumbling and you say, oh man, I haven't eaten in a few hours. I should probably stop playing Saints Row 4 and probably go get a piece of pizza or something and maybe go to bed. Or those people where they'll completely leave their girlfriend or wife or whatever aside because they got Call of Duty. She's literally throwing her panties at them and they're like, honey, we have a raid scheduled here. I know those people exist. I've met those people. I've been friends with some of those people. Friends in quotes. But again, video games were not the problem. It was those people. And sometimes the culture around video games that may have been the problem. So this thing with Joe Rogan, stop blowing this up. I keep seeing it on Facebook and all this that, oh my God, Joe Rogan said video games are a problem. And while he did, I think he was more implying video games are a problem for him. He didn't say that, but that when you watch the clip of him, that's heavily what he's implying. He has a problem with video games. And unfortunately, the media will and did run with it that, Joe Rogan says video games are rotting your brain. No, they rotted his brain. He didn't say they're rotting your brain. Because sooner or later, especially with video games becoming as huge as they are, it's a multi-billion-dollar-a-year industry. Eventually, you're going to run into the problem where, oh my God, this is, where regulations are going to come in. Oh my God, this is a problem from some outside source, from some regulatory agency. Yeah, I know we have the ESRB, but some regulatory agency is going to feel like they have to step in, and this is all going to spiral out of control, and it's going to get all super ridiculous all over again. Because we all know that that's eventually going to come if idiots like Joe Rogan keep spouting the nonsense that they do about video games. Remember when horror films would rot your brain. Some of you are probably too young to remember this. I remember, 88, 89, the whole thing, because VHS, almost every home had a VCR at that point. VHS was super huge. There was this whole huge thing. Horror movies are going to rot your brain. And that's just in America. That's not even talking about in the UK with the video nasties and all that stuff. So there's honestly, I think we're overdue for the moral panic of video games are rotting your brain. I honestly do. I don't agree with it. Don't put words in my mouth. I'm not saying this is something that we should do. I'm saying I believe we're overdue for it. It's going to happen. It happened with Night Trap and Mortal Kombat and all of the situation that made the ESRB. But the thing is, these things happen on a regular basis. Remember that scene in Dread where Mama is not even surprised that they're having a bust, and she's like, well, we're overdue anyway. We'll let it go. We're overdue. That's what I think about video games. We're overdue. And I'm not even getting into Gamergate or any of that. I'm just saying we are overdue for the moral panic about video games. Seems to happen every 7 to 9 years. We're due one. And we should survive this one the same as we survive all of the others. At least we should. So, alright, we're going to take another quick break. When we come back, we're going to talk about heady sci-fi versus, ooh, that exploded real good. And then in the final segment, we're going to take a deep dive into one of the most influential and one of the most overlooked horror anthology series ever, Rod Serling's Night Gallery.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Last episode, I asked what got you into science fiction. What made you like science fiction? And I very much pontificated that science fiction is about ideas. That it's not about the trappings, it's not about laser guns, it's not about spaceships, it's not about aliens, it's not about time travel or gods or anything like that. Well, there's two real kinds of science fiction when it comes to televised, whether it be movies or films. And so let's leave literature out of this right now. Let's leave video games out of it. What kind of science fiction do you like the most? Do you like a heady, really thought-provoking, deep, you have to pay attention to everything kind of science fiction where you're like, wow, this is really a logical idea based on logical assumptions that bring us to a logical conclusion? Or do you like a Michael Bay Transformers, oh, that blowed up great, oh my god, did you see that building, it just bloated it up? What kind of science fiction do you like more? Because I can't stand the showy, blowy-uppy kind of science fiction. I just hate it. I hate it so much. When I see people calling a Transformers movie one of the best times they've had at the movies, obviously it's pre-COVID when there was actually movies, it just makes me go, ugh. When I see some just utter piece of trash science fiction just blowing up the box office or being the number one trending show on Netflix or Hulu or whatever, it makes me go, oh. Because that doesn't mean you can't have explosions. That doesn't mean you can't have excitement. I'm not talking about a boring talk fest where the characters are literally just sitting there yibbering for 90 minutes and that's it. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm also not talking about where it is just things blowing up with lots of expensive CGI and, a whole bunch of just a disposable CGI army like an Avengers movie just over and over and over again. That's one of the reasons I can't stand the Marvel films. They aren't about ideas. They're about how much CGI can we cram awkwardly into this situation we've created for ourselves. I mean, at least the DC movies, they're bad ideas, but they're ideas nonetheless. The whole idea of Batman versus Superman, what if Superman were an asshole and how would he interact with the regular world? That's an idea there. The Marvel movies are, oh, look at that! Thor's beating up the Hulk! Oh my god! To me, that's not enjoyment. It's like a Fast movie, a Fast and the Furious movie. These are some of the dumbest films I've ever seen. I mean, obviously we haven't seen Fast 9, which is just kind of painful to say yet. But the fact that when I watched that trailer, I literally think I'm dumber for having watched that trailer. That for the last few movies, it's been the Fast movies are men's soap operas. Because really they are. You have amnesia, you have fake out deaths, you have betrayals and double crosses. It's the same as a soap opera, but it's for men. This is a manly soap opera. This is testicular soap opera. And that's kind of what you get with the Avengers movies and the Marvel movies. People get so invested in these. And it's not wrong to be invested in a film or to care about these characters. But these are brainless characters. These are brainless, stupid action in brainless, stupid movies. Like, to kind of go back to my fandom thing from a segment or two ago, when I saw Avengers Infinity War, so obviously Endgame's not out, everyone knows all the characters are coming back, but they might not know how they're all coming back. Now, there was some people a few seats behind me, people I don't know. It was just my girlfriend and I going. The theater was packed, but I don't know these people. So they were in their, I want to peg them at early to mid-20s, 23, 24, 25, somewhere in there. And at the end of the movie, after Thanos does the snap and half the people all dust away, The lights come up, the credits are over. These guys, they're sitting there, and one of them is shaking, and he goes, I don't know how I can process what just happened. And he was processing this like he just saw on the news an Iranian terrorist squad blew up his hometown. It's like, you do understand these are fictional characters, right? These are not real people. You didn't just watch your grandmother die. You just watched a film. So to him, this was a very heady, deep emotional movie. I watched this same film and kept rolling my eyes going, oh my God. So we are going to have a different definition of what is heady, about what is deep when it comes to science fiction. I think on one end, you have something like the Transformers films, which are the exact opposite of deep. They're so shallow that Slender Man couldn't drown in these waters. There's nothing to a Transformers movie. These are the biggest, dumbest, stupidest movies ever made. That doesn't mean you can't enjoy them. Okay, I'm not saying if you enjoyed John Turturro being lubricated that you're somehow lesser than I. Because you can enjoy dumb crap. I enjoy dumb crap. I think the Transformers movie from 1986, I've watched that movie literally hundreds of times. I went to the, 30th or 40th anniversary or whatever it was, a couple of years ago to see it in the theater again. I love that movie. And that is not an intelligent film. It is a genius Orson Welles film, no pun intended because Orson Welles is actually in it, compared to the Michael Bay Transformers movies, but that's not the point here. I also love movies that are slower and take their time to develop an idea and a character, and the kind of movies that my girlfriend hates. She watched Mandy, Panos Cosmatos' Mandy, and she thought it was boring and stupid. Okay, I can kind of see that. I thought it was one of the best movies of the year. Same thing with Sorry to Bother You by Boots Riley. I named that one of the best movies of the year. She found it too weird and too talky. That's fine. That's nothing wrong with that. So the question is, what should a sci-fi movie be? Should there be a happy medium between talky and heady and explosion-y? Or is one worse than the other? Because you see a lot of people, especially science fiction fans, on paper, you hear them say that they like intelligent stories, that they want deep, rich characters. But then you end up seeing them loving Jodie Whittaker as Doctor Who, which is some of the dumbest scripting I've ever seen. And no, not because she's a woman. Doctor Who should have been a woman a long time before this. It's just the Jodie Whittaker Doctor Who seasons are horrendously written. There's some of the worst scripting I've seen in a mainstream science fiction TV series in a long time. I just think Jodie Whittaker, who was also, I think, a good actor, she should have really forced better scripts, because female Doctor Who should have been something that worked. But that said, where's the line? Should a Roger Corman movie immediately be discounted because it might not have the headiest script, might have gratuitous nudity in it? Or should a Roger Corman movie be embraced because it might not be the headiest script and it has gratuitous nudity in it? Take a film like Piranha, Joe Dante's Piranha from 1978. So, Piranha is an incredibly intelligent film with great drawn characters, probably due to, I think John Sayles, if not is the credited writer, I think he did rewrites on it, to John Sayles' script, which he absolutely did for Alligator and things like that, especially Battle Beyond the Stars, again, for Roger Corman. He made witty characters and unique situations, but at the same time, It's got a bunch of nude shots and a bunch of teenagers being eaten by piranha. You got Paul Bartel being eaten by piranha while smacking the water around. Does that make it not heady anymore? Does that make Piranha not an intelligent movie? So where does the line come then? What about something, let's just stick with Roger Corman. What about something like Forbidden World or Galaxy of Terror? Are those, all of a sudden, should they be dismissed because, well, Galaxy of Terror has a woman raped to death by a giant space maggot and Sid Haig being killed by his own disembodied arm. Does that make the movie stupid because it's still clearly an exploitation film? No, it doesn't. But a lot of people will look at it like that. And that's where my issues come into this. You have to look at science fiction for, I guess, what it is rather than what it is not, if that makes any sense. So think about it like this. If you want a super detailed, intelligent, thought-provoking movie that you have to pay just 100% attention to, look at a movie like, I can't remember if it's from 2015 or 2016, the movie Synchronicity, the one where Michael Ironside is the villain. I rented that movie on a blind. I saw, Michael Ironside's in a sci-fi movie. Okay, all right, we'll rent this. Watched it with my girlfriend. I was just blown away. This movie was all about ideas. This movie was all about, like I said at the beginning of this segment, getting logically from one point to another point in a logical fashion that was intelligent. The ending is so subtle that you might miss what it means on the first pass. I don't think there's a single gunfight in the movie. I haven't seen it in a few years. I don't think there's a single gunfight in the movie. I don't think there's anything that you would call quote unquote exciting in the film if you're not getting into the dialogue and all the character interactions and the how can two people from two different times that are the same person exist in the same space? Or can they? At the same time, right around that same point, I know the movie's older, I saw The Man with the Iron Fists. The RZA film. The one with Russell Crowe in that. That film is the farthest in the world from being talkative, from being heady, from being slow. You'd never accuse Man with the Iron Fists of being intelligent genre entertainment. But at the same time, it was still entertainment. I thoroughly loved that film. I thought Russell Crowe stole that movie. And it's probably the only thing Eli Roth has ever been involved in that I didn't not only not hate, but liked somewhat. And I never got around to seeing the sequel yet. I own the DVD. I got it for $1 at Dollar Tree, but I have not got around to seeing the sequel yet. I don't know if I should, because Russell Crowe is the character that really pulled me out of that movie, or pulled me into that movie, and he's obviously not in the sequel. But look at something like Synchronicity and Man with the Iron Fists. They're totally different, but they're both good movies. So that's the question I want to posit to you. What does it take to be a good science fiction film? Does it take being heady and talky and having great ideas? Or does it take a whole bunch of stuff exploding and people's heads blowing up? Because I truly think you can have both. You know, you remember those old taco commercials with the little Mexican girl where we want flatbread, we want hard tacos, we want soft tacos. Why not both? Because unfortunately in science fiction fandom, you kind of have this, again, going to the tribalism I brought up earlier. You're either heady, talky sci-fi or you're boom, boom, explosion-y sci-fi. So why can't you be both? I thoroughly love lots of stupid, films I cannot defend on an intellectual level whatsoever. These are stupid films. But I love them. At the same time, I can totally see why someone might zone out to some of these slower, more talkative films because they don't have a bunch of action in it. Look at a movie like Space Hunter Adventures in the Forbidden Zone. It's not a smart movie in any way, but it's a damn fine movie. Then you got something like Outland, which is a pretty smart movie, not counting some of the stupid moments that come in the third act, but you wouldn't call that an action film, would you? So where does science fiction land? That's my question to you. That's my question I posit. So we're going to take another break. When we come back, let's look at Rod Serling's Night Gallery.
Watching TV has changed over time. Streaming has become the new norm. That's why Golden State Media Concepts television podcast dives headfirst to the world of cord cutting. Want to be on the loop of what's hot in Netflix? Or if it's not a preference, what about original shows in Hulu? We've got you covered. Join us as we fill in the blank and talk about movies to stream and what show you should be binging. This is the Golden State Media Concepts television podcast.
How many people out there know Rod Serling, not from the Twilight Zone, but from some of the other things he's done, like A Town Is Turned to Dust, or Patterns, or something like that? Because as much as I identify Rod Serling with the Twilight Zone, and he should be identified with the Twilight Zone, he wrote, I think, 3/4 of all the episodes, and even the ones he didn't were based on ideas from him. So I'm not saying Rod Serling should not be associated with the Twilight Zone. I'm saying, how many of you remember his horror entry that unfortunately was very plagued with problems? But that would be Rod Serling's Night Gallery. This is after he sold his stake, I think mistakenly so, in the Twilight Zone to CBS, because I think he would have made a ton more money had he stuck to it. But again, when he sold the Twilight Zone, syndication wasn't really a big thing, so he couldn't have seen what TZ would end up becoming. But he was brought out of retirement. Well, not retirement, that's the wrong word. He was brought out of, he didn't want to do anthology television again. He had created a series called The Loner, which didn't do well. It was just a Western. And he'd done some more episodic TV, and he didn't really want to deal with that. He was writing. He was a writer. Rod Serling was a true writer. And they brought him out, Universal brought him out for NBC's Night Gallery. It was officially called Rod Serling's Night Gallery, but that's kind of a misnomer. While he did write, again, probably 3/4 of all of the scripts, he hosted every episode, even episodes that were not Night Gallery, which I'll get to in a little bit. He was not in charge. This was not like Twilight Zone. When it came to Twilight Zone, not counting censorship or sponsor interference, he was the final word on Twilight Zone. He controlled the scripts. He decided what they were going to do. He was the producer. He was the EP, the executive producer. Twilight Zone was Rod Serling's baby. Despite having his name above the title, Night Gallery was not that. And that was due to producer Jack Laird, who is, I don't want to say is necessarily a bad producer and writer, but he made a lot of weird decisions. And that would really haunt the series, because Laird was a very weird guy. He didn't interact well with people. Nowadays, we would say he probably had autism, which wasn't really a thing that got diagnosed back then. Now we would say he probably had autism and was an extreme introvert, to the point where he almost could not interact with the writing staff, which is where Serling would come in. He and Serling would clash on just about everything, from tone to the content, everything. So Rod Serling is brought out, and they pay him a lot of money. He hosts all the episodes, very Twilight Zone style, but now he's in an art gallery with either paintings, gorgeous paintings, or objet d'art, statues, things like that. And that would represent whatever the story they're going for is. Now, initially, what NBC wanted, Serling was absolutely against. Now remember, he'd already signed a contract. He's locked into this, okay? They wanted, and I'm not exaggerating, I'm quoting here, Mannix for horror. They wanted, because Mannix was one of the biggest shows on television at the time, and that was on, I think, CBS. So NBC wanted Mannix. They wanted Mannix, but in a horror sense. And that's, Rod Serling wanted nothing to do with that. Absolutely nothing to do with that. So Serling was fighting them all along. Now, initially, in the first season of Twilight Zone, the first season of Night Gallery is not even a season. It was a rotating series called 3-in-1, where 1 week it would be an episode of The Psychiatrist. 1 week, I can't remember what the other one was. I think it was McLeod, maybe, or McMullen and Wife, or something like that. And then the next week would be a Night Gallery episode. And this was after a 90-minute pilot, where one of the segments was directed by this newcomer who would never have anything good happen in his career again, named Steven Spielberg. You probably never heard of this guy before, but he got his start really on Night Gallery. Rod Serling gave him his chance. And so the first season is only 6 episodes, and they were kind of scattered all about the schedule. Season 2 is a little more structured, but the thing is, Night Gallery is an hour. And so you would have all of these different stories of different lengths. Maybe you'd have like a Question of Fear, which is like a 48-minute thing, and then you'd have 2 little comedic 1 to 2 minute segments. And the comedic segments were a big problem for Serling. Those were 100% layered. Those were called blackouts. Serling fought against them 100%. He hated the blackouts. He hated these little humor segments that, even though this didn't exist yet, they feel more like Hilarious House of Frightenstein segments than they do Night Gallery. So Serling is just writing scripts, seeing them sometimes get butchered when they come on the screen, sometimes not. Sometimes these things, like they're tearing down Tim Riley's bar or Question of Fear, my God, are these fantastic, however length they are of television. These are amazing. So Serling he's not really happy with Night Gallery. He doesn't have control of it. Jack Laird and him just do not get along. Not at all. And Laird has the final say, obviously. So season 2 of Night Gallery goes along, and season 3, they decided to make some changes. So instead of being multiple stories in an hour-long setting, or an hour-long time slot, season 3 was 1 half-hour story per episode. So the format totally changed, and you can tell the budget went down. I don't know if they were running out of, Universal backlots that they could use or something, but the budget clearly went down. And then Night Gallery just vanished. It just sort of vanished. But it didn't. So, as the 70s are going on, syndication has become a big thing. Syndication is where a show would be what's called stripped. It has to have 100 episodes, and then you would strip it, and you would give it to all the local stations all around the country, like your local station that was maybe not an NBC affiliate, a CBS affiliate, or an ABC affiliate. Fox doesn't exist yet. Maybe they would show Night Gallery along with some episodes of Kojak or something in the afternoon, right before dinner, or classic Star Trek. Those were the syndicated ones. This is after it's left network prime time, and it's just given to the stations. So they wanted to syndicate Night Gallery because even though it was canceled, it still had enough of a following. They thought people are still going to watch this, so they want to get their money out of it. Twilight Zone just killing it in syndication at this point. NBC is thinking, or Universal more specifically, why can't we do this for Night Gallery? But the problem is, for syndication, it's not a hard and fast rule, because like Gilligan's Island only had 98 episodes. There are some shows that only had 60 that were really big, but you need you need 100 episodes to be syndicated. Because then that way you can show the episodes 5 days a week without having a repeat for at least 3.5 months. So you have to have at least 100 episodes. Well, Night Gallery didn't have that. Night Gallery wasn't even close to having 100 episodes. So they decided, well, wait a minute. The first 2 seasons were hour-long episodes. So why don't we do this? We'll take those hour-long episodes and we'll cut them into a half hour. So then every one of the hour-long episodes is 2 episodes in syndication. Well, the problem with that is some of the stories were too long to be in an hour or in a half hour long format. So you have to cut the guts out of them. They don't make any sense anymore. And some of the episodes, some of the stories weren't long enough. They were only 20-some minutes after they were taken out of the Night Gallery setting. So we need to pad those out. So we'll add footage from other Universal movies that we own to pad them out. So you've got this mess that's now in the half-hour format, and Rod Serling while he would introduce each one, it doesn't fit in the now half-hour format. But even then, that said, there's still not enough. There's still not enough episodes. They're still short. Aha. But years after Night Gallery went off the air, there was a similar series Rod Serling had nothing to do with called The Sixth Sense. No, not the Shyamalan film. This was basically Gary Collins as a psychic investigator. But the thing is, it was shot on the same backlots as a lot of the Night Gallery episodes, had a lot of Night Gallery guest stars in The Sixth Sense. The Sixth Sense was shot by a lot of the same people that shot Night Gallery episodes. So if you remove the intro, these kind of felt like Night Gallery stories. They weren't, but they kind of felt like it. In a way, maybe it was a spiritual successor to Night Gallery. So what Universal decided to do was, well, Sixth Sense is an hour long. Why don't we cut the Sixth Sense episodes down to a half hour, and we'll insert them as Night Gallery episodes. But to do that, we need Rod Serling to come back so he can do Night Gallery introductions for Sixth Sense episodes. Now, an exact amount was never given, but the reason Serling did it was he said they offered him, and I quote, an absolutely absurd amount of money, unquote. So he came and did now Night Gallery intros for Sixth Sense episodes that are cut down to a half hour. And while not every one of the Sixth Sense ended up mildly coherent, some of them, the Sixth Sense did tend to drag a little bit if you've ever seen the uncut versions. Some of them actually work better at a half hour. I hate to admit that, but I think some of them work better at a half hour than they do at their hour-long length. But, so, now they had enough to syndicate Night Gallery with the Sixth Sense. Which is why if you watched Night Gallery in syndication throughout the 70s and 80s, it seemed like Gary Collins starred in every other episode of Night Gallery, which at the time you probably didn't realize was The Sixth Sense, which by the way, Harlan Ellison was a script supervisor on The Sixth Sense, if there's any more reason to try and go and look those episodes up. But so Gary Collins is starring in every other episode of Night Gallery. And they're half hour, they're incoherent because of the way they're cut up. There's a couple of added segments that were cut from the reruns while it was still on NBC, so there are some segments of Night Gallery you can only find in the syndicated versions that were not in the original version. It's kind of hard to explain. So you have all of a sudden Night Gallery in this just butchered form. And that's the form a lot of us older people grew up watching it in. I wasn't alive in 1969 when Night Gallery came out. I only saw these in syndication on some local channel out of Green Bay, Wisconsin. So it wasn't until Columbia House started putting out the VHS tapes. Remember the Columbia House? Try it free for 2 weeks, and if you don't like it, send it back to us, and you get the first tape for $4.99 and all that. Well, they started releasing these uncut for the first time. The Night Galleries the way you were supposed to see them. No Sixth Sense episodes, which is, like I said, kind of irritating because I hope when The Sixth Sense does come to DVD, they do include the Rod Serling intros because I really dug those. I thought they gave them a nice mood. But then the Mystery Channel, which was one of the Encore channels in the late 90s, started running Night Gallery Uncut. It was the only TV show that was on the Mystery Channel. The Mystery Channel just showed mystery movies. That was their whole thing. And they showed Night Gallery episodes uncut. So it was the first time I'd seen some of these uncut between the Mystery Channel stuff and the Columbia House stuff. And Night Gallery is just, it's so overlooked. When people think of Rod Serling, they immediately think of do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do, which, by the way, was not even part of the original Twilight Zone. That theme didn't even happen until season 2. But regardless of that, Night Gallery is so often overlooked, and I think people should go and give Night Gallery a new chance. Try to find the hour-long episodes, but if you can find the Sixth Sense episodes with the Rod Serling intros, those are interesting too. Now, the Sixth Sense has never been released uncut. There's a couple of uncut bootlegs that came from Kinescopes, but even when the Sixth Sense was run on the Chiller channel years ago, they were still cut to add commercial breaks. So the Sixth Sense episodes, which should run about 52 minutes without commercials, only run 49. So even the longer bootlegs that you can find of the entire Sixth Sense series is still not completely uncut. So that's why you're going to get into this weird thing where the Rod Serling intros, they matter, and then they don't, and it's nuts. But give Night Gallery a chance. You're probably not going to like the blackouts because nobody except Jack Laird liked the blackouts. But you're going to find episodes based on H.P. Lovecraft. There's episodes directed by Steven Spielberg. Leonard Nimoy directs an episode. Orson Welles is in an episode. You'll see a lot of famous faces before they were famous. Night Gallery is totally worth it. So, that said, I want to thank you for listening to the GSMC Sci-Fi podcast brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'd also like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show, write a nice review, and also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and all of the other nonsense. So, thank you, and have a good night.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Sci-Fi Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.